Greetings, my name is Soraya Cuesta and I'm the Director of International Students at Miami-Dade College North Campus. With me, Dr. Leon Palombo, Professor of the World Languages Department at Miami-Dade College North Campus. And today, as part of the event of Hispanic Heritage Month, we have the honor of having as our guest Ms. Alexia Núñez, Consul for Economics and Trade Promotion, who is also in charge of the Consulate General of Mexico in Miami. The topic for today is on Mexico-U.S. trade, challenges, opportunities, 200 years of bilateral relations. Thank you very much for coming, Consul, and it is a pleasure to have you here.
On the contrary, thank you so much for hosting me today, Dr. Cuesta, Dr. Palombo. It is a true honor to be here at Miami-Dade College.
Thank you. I'm going to be asking you the first question. What trade opportunities are there currently between Mexico and Florida?
I think they're very vast, but I would like to start by telling you briefly about the commercial relationship between Mexico and Florida, because not everybody is aware that actually Mexico is Florida's second largest trade partner, and trade has been growing in the past few years. There's actually a 14 billion trade between Mexico and Florida, and which is equivalent to what countries like the United States and Portugal trade. So we're at a good number. Around 8% of Florida's trade and trade is with Mexico, in the sense that Florida's imports from Mexico are around 8%, to correct the data. And we're seeing an increasing number of Mexican products in the alleys of the supermarkets and available for shopping. And having said this, what are the challenges? What are the opportunities? Sorry, I think there are unique opportunities due to the current context that we are having. First of all, with the nearshoring coming to Mexico, there are so many things that we can do, especially if we work on how we're gonna rework our supply chains. No? The first thing that is very interesting for me in this area, and I would like to mention, is the maritime opportunity, the opportunity to do trade using maritime routes. Since right now, only 6% of Mexican exports go through a maritime route. The rest, everything is done either by air cargo or through the Mexican border. But these types of trade is getting congested, and we can see that there's a competitive advantage of doing it using nautical routes. And besides the competitive advantage, we're neighbors. Mexico and Florida share a maritime border, so it's like something natural and something strategic to be able to use these routes. Florida has 15 seaports. Mexico has a very vast maritime infrastructure, so it is natural for us to use this connection. And I think this is one of the greatest opportunities. And with the nearshoring, tying it up to what I was saying about Mexico and the nearshoring that is coming to our country, I believe that we need to have an outlet for everything that is going to be produced in Mexico and exported to the United States. So using these routes is one of the ways that we can actually take advantage and take the opportunity. This is something more focused on the short and medium term. But in the long term, I think that the biggest opportunity is that we need to identify on how Florida and Mexico can start producing together. And this will be also part that this can also be derived from the nearshoring to our country. We need to identify sectors in which we can produce together to really take advantage and leverage the opportunities that agreements such as the USMCA have. And we need to identify strategic sectors where we can work on this, specifically, for instance, on the aerospace industry, that we know it's a very important part of the Florida economy. And it's also actually a very important part and a growing part of the Mexican economy. in states such as Querétaro, such as Chihuahua, such as Baja California. It's something that is growing, and I think that we can connect here, as well as the agricultural industry. It's something that we can also work. The auto part industry. There are a lot of sectors where we can start building on this, but we need to identify and start seeing how we can start talking to the private sector and to obviously the government to see how we can start really building a strategic partnership that is based on co-production between Mexico and Florida, because obviously between Mexico and the United States, we do produce a lot together.
Yeah, I was reading that in 2022, trade between Mexico and the United States was almost $780 billion, making Mexico the United States' second largest trade partner. So it's just out of it, Florida should be also having the same. So that's a great thing to know. Do you have your second question?
Thank you, Consul, for being here again. Since you were talking about nearshoring, my question is, how would you define nearshoring, and how can Mexico take advantage of this practice, since you were talking about nearshoring before?
Yes, nearshoring, as in a very practical way, and as I would mention, it is what is happening to relocate the production to countries that are closer to you. It's what we have been seeing, for instance, and it has been catalyzed by the pandemic, where dozens of businesses that were actually producing in China and Southeast Asia are moving nearer, and that's where the term nearshoring comes, to where they need to be consumed. So no, actually, they're coming to Mexico and to Latin America. But actually, I also like the term coined by the U.S.-Mexico Foundation, and because it's called ally shoring, because actually Mexico and the United States are allies, and they have been trading together for such a long time. We're natural allies in this. And what is important here to emphasize is that we do have a trade relationship, but we're also partners, and we know how to do business with each other, and we trust each other. So I would actually like to coin it as ally shoring, specifically between Mexico and the United States.
And it makes more sense, the term ally shoring than nearshoring.
Yes.
It definitely makes more sense.
Exactly.
Yes. Let me ask you, what are the challenges to increase tourism activity between Mexico and Florida?
I think there are a lot of challenges and things we can do. First of all, let me start by telling you that Mexico is one of the world's top 10 tourist destinations, and where we receive more passengers from is from the United States, where we receive more travelers. And from the 10 billion travelers that we received in 2021 approximately, 138,000, almost 13%, came from Florida. And of the ones that we received from Florida, about half of them come from Miami. So, having said that and understood that, I think there is a lot to increase in connectivity, in air connectivity, in cruise connectivity. We currently have about 137 frequencies every week. We have frequencies that depart from South Florida. We have frequencies from Miami International Airport, actually, that is where we have most frequencies, but also from Fort Lauderdale International Airport. And we have two places such as Mexico City, Monterrey, Guadalajara, Cozumel, Cancun. Those are Mérida, which was one of the ones we opened recently. But I think there is a lot of potential to increase this air connectivity. For instance, with places like Chetumal, where we actually used to have a weekly flight. It was canceled, but I think we need to do all of that and explore more and explore this connection, because I think there is an interesting market and we need to see how we can strengthen it. Or to other places of Mexico, for instance, Querétaro. There's a very big relationship now of people from Querétaro coming here and living in Florida or having homes in both parts of the country. And Querétaro is also access to all of the Bajío region in Mexico. So I think there's this opportunity to explore the connectivity between other regions and other places of Mexico and Florida. And also a very interesting thing I wanted to let you know is Miami International Airport, the number of international passengers it receives, the second country of origin is Mexico, actually. So there's a huge potential, actually, to increase this. And another area that I think is very important for us to explore to increase this connection is in sectors such as the medical tourism sector. For instance, Mexico is very big on this. We have a lot of clusters throughout the country. We have clusters in the Yucatan Peninsula, in the border region, in Mexico City, in the Bajío region. And it is very convenient for people to come and have medical services performed in Mexico because it's actually one of the highest quality services. And it's also a lot cheaper than in Florida or in the United States. So I think there is an interesting potential, an opportunity to delve into this, taking into consideration that also Florida has a very vast ecosystem of organizations in the medical tourism, in the tourism industry in general, but particularly in the medical tourism industry, such as the MTA, the Medical Tourism Association, or GHA, the Global Healthcare Accreditation. So this is one of the sectors that we can really look at to increase tourism. And another sector that I would like to mention about tourism is the LGBTQ sector. Mexico is completely open and defends the rights of the LGBTQ community. And we know that this is a segment of the population that travels a lot with a high acquisition power, and that they are double income, no kids, so they can travel frequently. And also tying it up to this question, there's also a lot of organizations, very significant organizations here in Florida that work on this issue, like the LGBTQ Travel Association, IGLITA, and whom we work closely. So I think that if we work on promoting tourism in the community, this can be increased in the LGBT community. This is one of the sectors and destinations that can be increased.
Yeah. Also, educational tourism, like study abroad programs and all of that, can be something that we could look into.
Definitely. We have amazing universities in Mexico, top quality, where we can have and delve into the exchange of students.
Yes.
So that is something that definitely we could work on. And also, I would like to mention that...
No.
Yeah.
It's just that we are going to be having to stop for a couple of minutes, and then we're going to go back. But finish with that thought.
Okay, just to mention that usually they see Mexico, like they have some enclaves of tourism in Mexico that are very common, such as Cancun, Mexico City, Acapulco. But I would also like to delve on hidden gems that are not also as known, such as places like Bacalar in the Yucatan Peninsula, or places as the Riviera Nayarit that maybe are a bit more unexplored. And I think there's also a huge potential of taking a look into these areas and see how we can increase connectivity with these areas.
Yes, thank you. Let's stop for a couple of minutes, and then we're going to go back with this same topic.
Perfect.
Welcome back. We're here with the Consul for Mexico, Alexia Núñez, and I have a question for you, Consul. Thank you for being here again.
Of course. It's my pleasure.
Thank you. What do you attribute to the fact that many companies currently prefer to delegate responsibilities and activities to countries close to the company's geographic location, instead of looking for countries that offer lower costs? And I know you were explaining a little bit about the nearshoring, so I know you talked a little bit about this already, but a little bit more specific on that.
Yes, of course. I think that We have been doing nearshoring in the case of Mexico and the United States for a long time. This is not new. No, especially it started with NAFTA being signed and with all the plants that came, especially the textile plants and manufacturing plants that were installed in the U.S.-Mexico border. So that was a first step for starting nearshoring. However, with the pandemic, I think this was deeply catalyzed. Just strategically, because of what we have been seeing with China, with the U.S.-China relationship, but it's also due to the logistics. And here, for instance, I would like to tell you that before a container that was moved or shipped from China to Miami could, for instance, cost $1,000 before the pandemic. With the pandemic, that container's cost rose to $20,000. Wow. So that was like one of the needs for companies to think of how they could restructure their costs, and if they could go and establish themselves in a country that was a lot closer, that the shipping costs were a lot less, and that besides that the manufacturing costs were equal or competitive, it was like a no-brainer. So that's what we've been seeing with nearshoring.
Perfect, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Now, last month, the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas reported that Mexico has officially replaced China as America's top trade partner. What competitive advantages do you think Mexico offers to the international market?
I think there are a lot. As I was saying, we're strategically located. We're located, we share a border with the United States, obviously, with more than 50 ports of entry between U.S. and Mexico that provide certainty, that provide reduced times, that provide reduced transportation costs, which I was mentioning previously. Also, due to the closeness, it's less contamination. And obviously, this facilitates trade. So that I would say, that our strategic location with the U.S. is one of the factors. Second, the cost structure. We have a very competitive cost structure. And as I was mentioning before, our manufacturing costs are practically equal to those in China and Southeast Asia. So you definitely need to look at Mexico when you want to do a business. We're also a predictable and reliable source of goods in diverse sectors. As I was telling you, we have a very solid aerospace industry that has been developing in the country for more than 30 years, but we also have the manufacturing industry, the maquilas. We also have a very solid agro industry all over Mexico, so you can find the products and the resources you need in our country. Definitely. We have also a solid economic stability and public finance, a very strong peso, and we're one of the most, and we also have a very highly skilled workforce. We're one of the countries in the OECD that graduates more engineers per year, and more engineers that speak English and that are fluent in English, which is a very competitive value if you're looking to start a business regarding Asia, for instance. And not only they are extremely competitive, they speak English, but you can also work with them at a reasonable cost. So I think that Mexico has everything to offer, honestly. It's
true, no? Based on what you're saying, yes.
Mm-hmm. And another factor which is also very important, we have obviously the USMCA agreement with North America, with the United States and Canada, but you also have access to us. Mexico has 14 trade agreements with other countries. So basically, when you do trade with Mexico, you're opening businesses to all of the world's regions, practically. We have a free trade agreement with the European Union, with a lot of the countries from Asia, with Japan, with PETAT, with APEC, with the Southeast Asian countries, with Australia, with New Zealand, with Latin America, with Colombia, with Peru, with Chile. So you're basically, with Central America, we also have free trade agreements. So basically, when you do business in Mexico, you have access to trading with all of the world.
Mexico, what would be the main obstacles to growth driven by relocation that you think?
Yes, I think obviously we do have obstacles and challenges. I think that one of the things that we need to work is to strengthen the relationship between the public and the private sector to really and fully take advantage of nearshoring, because it is a fact, no, that companies are relocating to our country. They have done so before, but right now, as I was mentioning before, this has been catalyzed with the pandemic. But I think we need to work a bit stronger and to work in messaging, no, in a stronger messaging and in a stronger institutional opportunities to provide to the private sector. And from the government's perspective, I think we also need to be more agile when companies want to start a business in Mexico, more agile in the paperwork and in facilitating their establishment in our country. So I think that those are like the main challenges that we're facing right now.
Thank you.
We have programs, just to add a bit more to this, like INVEX, that is a program that started no more than 20 years ago, facilitating efforts of companies that establish in our country and that export their products. We have very high tax incentives for those companies. However, one of the challenges is like the paperwork that has to be done. I think we need to be more agile on that.
And I was going to ask you for an example, so that's a great example that you gave right now with that company. So.
Yes. And also to mention, I think it's, as I was telling you, we're one of the countries that graduates more highly skilled professionals and engineers. And so I think it's also an issue of imaging. We need to do the shift and think of Mexico not as a manufacturing, but as a mentefactura in Spanish. In Spanish we say manufactura, but we need to switch that to be seen as a company that does mentefactura, which is like a very highly skilled and professional workforce that we have to offer.
What would be the advantages that Mexico has over China in this conversation that we're having?
Yes, of course. I think there are many. And as I was mentioning, please look at Mexico as a place to invest, as a place to start your business, as a place to trade. But of course, one of the main advantages, and which I haven't dwelled upon a lot, is the USMCA. The USMCA provides the legal certainty for investment and for trade. It modernized NAFTA, and as I was saying, it provides the legal certainty that is needed for trade to grow. We are not only, as I was saying before, we're not only trading together, but actually the U.S., Mexico, and Canada are producing together. We are not a single thing is produced only in the U.S., Mexico, or Canada, but they're jointly produced and combined, like we have seen in the auto industry. One of the parts can start in Missouri or in Kentucky and then go back to Mexico and then cross the border again, and then for a car to be finally assembled in the United States. It can take up, for some instances, for an automobile to be produced, it can take 8 border crossings. So we're definitely producing together. And going back to what I was mentioning about the USMCA and the advantages it brings, it also modernized its chapters to be more inclusive and a more comprehensive treaty, so that the benefits that come from free trade can really spread into all of society. For instance, for women, it has a chapter on minority-owned businesses, so that actually we can include minority-owned businesses and small businesses into the free trade of Mexico, Canada, and the United States. And they have actually been working on specific forums that are geared towards women, towards building capacity and towards training women, so that these small businesses owned by them can actually be inserted into the free trade channels. That's one of as an example. And also, for instance, intellectual property rights have been added to the USMCA, stronger regulations on intellectual property rights. Digital economy, it was something that wasn't spoken of in the NAFTA, but it is now a chapter in the USMCA. So I think having the trade agreement is definitely a competitive advantage versus China, adding to what I had mentioned before in the interview. And we're basically one of the most competitive regions in the world, with one of the highest GDPs in the world. The NAFTA region has a $26 trillion GDP, and we have only 6.5% of the world's population. So I think
that's good.
we're not only trading together, building together, but we're really a true North American partnership.
Yes. Thank you.
And going back to the nearshoring, and I think you spoke a little bit about this already, which sector do you think Mexico has the great opportunity for growth that you would say right now?
Yes, I think there are a couple of sectors. One of these sectors is the auto industry, but the green auto industry, We had actually this year, if I'm not wrong, Tesla announced its plant. It's opening one of its largest producing plants that is going to be located in the state of Nuevo León, in Mexico, very close to Monterrey, and where they're going to be assembling electric vehicles. Also, for instance, BMW has already been in Mexico for a couple of years, but it's going to have a production plant based on electric vehicles in, I believe, the state of Guadalajara, in the Bajío region. And we also actually have a Mexican company producing 100% Mexican electric vehicles in the state of Puebla. That is called Sacua. So I think this is one of the top things that we're going to see, of the top industries that are going to be benefited from nearshoring. And another one is the semiconductor industry. Almost all of the chips that we use in our cell phones were being produced in Asia, in Taiwan, in China. But I think that is a huge opportunity, and that actually it is migrating to Mexico and the United States, and not only in the private sector, but it's also a very relevant topic for governments, and that it's being spoken of and worked upon in the high-level economic dialogue of Mexico and the United States.
Thank you very much. Great.
We have run out of time, but this is a wonderful interview, a wonderful topic. We are going to continue with this conversation, because we're going to invite you for future programs, and it's a pleasure having you here. Thank you for coming.
No, thank you so much for including us at the Consulate. It's an honor to be here and a pleasure to continue this dialogue, and please think of Mexico when you're trying to do business, investment, trade.
We will.
And tourism, of course. And traveling, please also think of Mexico when you travel.
Yes.
I would like to thank Dr. Soraya Cuesta and especially Consul Alexia Núñez for discussing with us the topic of 200 years of bilateral trade relations between Mexico and the U.S. On behalf of the Hispanic Heritage Committee, I hope you have enjoyed this presentation. Thank you all.